People often tell you to not eat too many carbohydrates and keep your blood sugar low. In this video, I'm going to share with you my regular day of eating, where I eat over 300 grams of carbs, to see how my blood sugar responds to that. I'm going to share with you all the meals I eat, how my blood sugar responds to it in real time, how long does my blood sugar stay elevated for, and I'll also share the studies about what's the optimal blood sugar level for the lowest risk of all-cause mortality. Alright, so it's 7 a.m. I'm going to measure the blood sugar. 4.4, that's like 78 milligrams per deciliter, which is really good. Alright, let's talk about fasting blood sugar. It's a common blood marker used to assess the risk of diabetes. A healthy fasting blood sugar should be below 100 milligrams per deciliter, or less than 5.6 millimoles per liter. Diabetes is categorized with over 126 milligrams per deciliter, or over 7 millimoles per liter. If your fasting blood sugar is between 100 and 125, or 5.6 to 7, then that's a sign of impaired glucose tolerance and prediabetes. However, it's always important to note that what's normal isn't necessarily optimal. So what's the optimal blood sugar level for the lowest all-cause mortality risk? A massive 2017 study among 12 million Korean adults saw a direct correlation between fasting blood sugar levels and mortality. The lowest mortality risk was seen with a fasting glucose of 80 to 94 milligrams per deciliter, or 4.4 to 5.2 millimoles per liter, irrespective of sex and age. Between glucose levels of 100 to 199 milligrams per deciliter, or 5 to 11.1 millimoles per liter, every 18 milligram per deciliter or 1 millimole increase was linked to a 13% higher mortality risk. So the higher the fasting blood sugar, the higher the risk of mortality. My morning fasting blood sugar of 4.4 millimoles or 79 milligrams per deciliter puts me pretty much into the optimal range. So it's 9:40, I got back from the walk and my blood sugar is 4 millimoles right now, which is trending on the lower, so it's 72 milligrams per deciliter. Right here we have 1 scoop of whey protein, some creatine, 10 grams of collagen peptides, and 4 grams of TMG, which I'm taking. And what I'm going to add are some frozen blueberries, maybe like 150 grams or something. And it's more like a smoothie consistency. So that's like 30 grams of protein plus 10 grams of collagen and 15 grams of carbs. So I'm also going to have this handful of walnuts. So great for polyphenolic compounds and healthy fats plus some fiber. All right, so it's been approximately 1 hour since I drank the thing and my blood sugar is 4.5. So it did go up to like 4.8 at one point, but that's still 86 milligrams per deciliter. So that's still very low level. So there wasn't really like any spike in my blood sugar. And right now it's already going down. So the workout is done. Quick measurement. And it's 5.5. And as you can see, it didn't really spike that high during the workout. It stayed pretty flat. And that's because I wasn't doing anything super intense or like super long. I didn't do cardio. I did regular calisthenics. So it's dinner time. For dinner, I'm having a vegetable mix with 100 grams of beetroot, 100 grams of kimchi, 3 egg whites, because my wife can't eat the egg whites, so I'm eating the leftovers, and 200 grams of smoked salmon, which is great. And I'll also have 600 grams of sweet potato. So that's like 150 grams of carbs from this alone. On top of here, I'll add 2 tablespoons of olive oil as well. So I finished eating the main course. I'm going to measure the blood sugar. It's a 5.7, which is around 100 milligrams per deciliter. So that's still pretty low after having eaten 600 grams of potatoes. And it's also the highest it's been for the day. We'll see how high it stays like that. And before I finish for the day, I'm going to also have some dessert, which is going to be this some sort of curd, which is pretty much like cottage cheese. And I'm going to add a banana there and kiwi, and maybe like a little bit of this, what's it called? Persimmon as well. And it's going to be like a fruit mix with the yogurt. This is what it looks like. The banana and the cottage cheese curd mixed in. I put a little bit of milk as well. And Apollo definitely wants some. I did put like a teaspoon of glycine, which does lower blood sugar, with like a yogurt bowl. Alright, so it's been about an hour since I finished the dinner. I'm gonna take the blood sugar measurement. It's 4.6. So it's pretty much down to the fasting levels within an hour after eating, which is the healthy response. That it even didn't go that high. Like it rose, as you remember, while I was eating in between the meals. It rose to 5.7 millimoles per liter, which is just 100 milligrams per deciliter. And now it's down to 4.6 again. Alright, so let me bring together the daily macros and calories for the day. Total calories for the day was around 2,400, 2,500 calories. Protein, 153 grams of protein, which is actually a bit higher than usually. Usually I'll stay around 130 grams of protein. Carbs, 317 grams of carbs, which is also a little bit higher than usually. Usually I'm gonna be something like between 250 to 300 grams of carbs, and fat, 76 grams, which is my usual intake as well. Something like 75 grams is my regular fat intake for the day. If you look at the average blood sugar levels over the course of these 14 days that I used the device, then my average blood sugar level with this CGM was 4.5 millimoles per liter, which is 81 milligrams per deciliter, and that's very good. Average blood sugar tends to be a better marker of metabolic health and overall health because it's less dependent of the fluctuations in the morning. Your fasting blood sugar can often be influenced by other things, such as how long you slept. If you have sleep deprivation, then your fasting blood sugar is going to be higher than normally, which necessarily isn't a sign of bad metabolic health. It's just that you didn't sleep long enough. And it's also influenced by other factors like stress, exercise, etc. The gold standard for looking at average blood sugar over the course of the last 3 months is glycated hemoglobin, or hemoglobin A1C. Diabetes is with a hemoglobin A1C of 6.5% or higher. In terms of mortality risk, then there's a linear association between hemoglobin A1C levels above 5.5% and primary cardiovascular events and mortality. The lowest risk is observed with an hemoglobin A1C below 5.2%. To know your hemoglobin A1C, you can do a blood test at your doctor, but there are also online calculators for hemoglobin A1C using your average blood sugar levels. Diabetes.co.uk has this calculator, and my estimated hemoglobin A1C based on my average blood sugar levels with this CGM would be 4.4%, which is very good. Let's talk about insulin as well. It has a bad reputation for being like a fat storage hormone and a hormone that just generally is bad for you. Yes, high fasting insulin is a risk factor for diabetes, heart disease, and overall mortality. However, producing insulin in response to a meal is healthy because it's the insulin that's going to lower the blood sugar again. If you don't produce insulin in response to a food, then that's a sign of poor metabolic health, unless you have type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune disorder that results in not producing insulin because the autoimmunity is killing the insulin-producing pancreatic beta cells. A 2023 cohort study over 10 years found exactly that. The people with the most robust insulin response to an oral glucose tolerance test had the lowest risk of diabetes and metabolic dysfunction 10 years into the future. The reason why my blood sugar levels came back so quickly after eating 200-300 grams of carbohydrates is because my body is very insulin sensitive. Whenever my body detects a rise in blood sugar, it produces insulin that then shuttles the glucose into the cells and muscle glycogen. So if your blood sugar stays high after eating, then that's partly because of poor insulin sensitivity and not producing enough insulin. Or the cells have become resistant to the actions of insulin, which is called insulin resistance. However, if your fasting insulin is elevated, then that's a sign of poor insulin sensitivity and insulin resistance. So what's the optimal fasting insulin level then? In this 2004 meta-analysis of 11 studies, they found that people in the highest quartile of fasting insulin had a significantly higher risk of cardiovascular disease mortality compared to those in the lowest quartile of fasting insulin. In men, there was a pretty linear relationship between higher fasting insulin and heart disease mortality, but in women, the effects were more prominent in the highest quartile and less so at the bottom 3 quartiles. The highest fasting insulin levels in men were around 16 microunits per liter, and the lowest were around 3.5 microunits per liter. In women, the highest were around 14 microunits per liter and the lowest around 3.6 microunits per liter. My fasting insulin on my last blood test was 2.98 microunits per liter, which is in the lowest risk group and excellent. One great way to estimate your insulin sensitivity with fasting insulin and fasting glucose is the HOMA-IR test. You can just calculate it with your fasting blood sugar and fasting insulin in an online calculator like omnicalculator.com. My HOMA IR based on my results is 0.58, which is very good. A HOMA IR above 1 is not optimal, and it's a sign of poor insulin sensitivity. And a HOMA IR above 1.8 is indicative of prediabetes. The last blood marker worth talking about are triglycerides. A triglyceride is a glycerol molecule with 3 fatty acid chains, hence triglyceride. High triglyceride levels are associated with diabetes, insulin resistance, heart disease, and all-cause mortality. The reason triglycerides are relevant to blood sugar levels is because high triglyceride levels in the blood inhibit insulin production and they promote insulin resistance by damaging pancreatic beta cells where insulin is produced. That's why diabetics always have elevated triglyceride levels. In fact, high fasting triglyceride levels are considered a more common cause of type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance than a high fasting blood sugar. This phenomenon is called lipotoxicity, with lipo referring to a fat or triglycerides. The normal triglyceride levels are considered to be below 150 milligrams per deciliter, or 1.7 millimoles per liter. However, triglycerides above 50 milligrams per deciliter or 0.6 millimoles per liter are already linked to a higher risk of cardiovascular disease until above 200 milligrams per deciliter or 2.2 millimoles per liter. So normal isn't optimal, and you want to keep your triglyceride levels below 50 milligrams for the lowest risk. My triglyceride levels are usually hovering around 30 to 50 milligrams per deciliter. However, before running this continuous glucose experiment, my triglyceride levels were 22 milligrams per deciliter, which is very low and excellent. The reason for that drop is probably because of eating less dietary fat. Alright, I've covered the major blood markers, I've covered my full day of eating, so now let's talk about how do you achieve very good insulin sensitivity so that eating more carbohydrates would have almost no effect on your blood sugar levels. The first thing is having low visceral fat. Visceral fat is this fat around the organs and it inhibits insulin secretion and increases inflammation. My visceral fat is extremely low, which is one of the reasons I'm so insulin sensitive. I'm not going to go into all the details of how I achieved such low visceral fat, but you can check out my other video on the topic. But here's a quick overview. Besides losing weight and getting to around 10% body fat as a man, you can also consume dietary polyphenols from things like green tea, olive oil, and vegetables, because they all reduce visceral fat and improve insulin sensitivity. What I've noticed as well is that reducing your methionine intake that you get from animal protein and increasing your glycine intake that you get from collagenous tendon meats or a glycine supplement, that also has been seen to reduce visceral fat. And for my own example, that's also one of the biggest things that resulted in my loss of visceral fat to extremely low levels. Secondly, exercise is probably the biggest reason I have such high insulin sensitivity, especially resistance training, which is amazing for depleting your muscle glycogen where your body stores glucose. Eating carbohydrates after resistance training makes the glucose enter muscle cells even without the need of insulin by activating a glucose transporter called GLUT4. Third, walking after meals is what helps to lower the blood sugar faster after eating. Even as little as 2 minutes of walking can help, but optimally you want to aim for at least 10 to 15 minutes after every meal. Adding vinegar to your meals is another great way to improve your blood sugar response. There are several studies in humans showing that. This also helps to lower the rise of triglycerides after eating and improve satiety. Another important method or idea that I keep in mind is not combining high amounts of fats and high amounts of carbohydrates together. Lipotoxicity occurs because the body isn't efficient at burning carbs and fats at the same time. For example, elevated insulin inhibits fat burning, and elevated triglycerides are implicated in insulin resistance by reducing glucose disposal. That's why when I'm eating carbohydrates, I'm not eating a ton of fats, with the exception of olive oil and marine-based omega-3s, because they can actually improve insulin sensitivity. As you can see from my chronometer, my fat intake for the day was 76 grams, which is not low, but not very high either. It's kind of moderate. If I had eaten a lot more fat with those meals, my blood sugar would have stayed elevated for longer. Lastly, I want to talk about the effects of a low carb and a high carb diet on your insulin sensitivity. Yes, if you're eating more carbs than your body can handle, then your insulin sensitivity and blood sugar levels will worsen over time. Your visceral fat will increase and you become more insulin resistant. However, if you're a fit and healthy person, then a low carb intake tends to actually worsen your insulin sensitivity, at least when you're not eating carbohydrates. I've done low carb diets in the past, and my blood sugar levels are better now than they were before. That's because your body becomes less efficient at producing insulin if you're not stimulating it. It's like a muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it. But if you overuse it, if you abuse it, if you secrete too much insulin too frequently throughout the day, every day, then yes, you will eventually become insulin resistant. Me, if I'm stimulating insulin once or twice a day with a time-restricted eating schedule and while after having exercised, then it's not an issue for me. This insulin response is actually a healthy thing for me. So in my opinion, if you are, yes, someone with poor insulin sensitivity, with poor glucose tolerance, then a short-term low-carb intake is great for improving your blood sugar levels. It's certainly better to have lower blood sugar levels than to be higher blood sugar levels. But if you're otherwise healthy, you exercise, and you're generally insulin sensitive, then keeping the carbohydrates in your diet actually maintains your insulin sensitivity for longer. Alright, that's it for this video. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do another experiment where I eat 500 grams of carbs and see what happens then. But usually on my most days, I'm gonna stick around 250, 300 grams of carbs, something like that. Check out my new book, The Longevity Leap, that walks you through 24 chapters on all different aspects of aging and longevity. You learn about nutrition, exercise, blood work, and supplements. Get The Longevity Leap from Amazon. Other than that, thanks for watching this video. Make sure to click a like and subscribe for future videos about living longer and staying healthier. My name is Siim. Stay optimized, stay empowered.